Okay, so today I'm repairing this LG 50PS3000. It's a 50-inch plasma TV, and I found the fault after a couple hours of diagnosing. Now I'm kind of disgusted in myself and how long it took me to diagnose this fault, and it's quite a difficult one actually. It's an intermittent fault, which are normally a lot harder to trace down, whereas if there's a fuse blown, you know, find out what circuit the fuse is of, and then find out if something's shorted along the line. But no, this fault only happens every so often, and very hard to find. But I found out what's causing it. It's actually the main board, which is an EAX 575-66202 main board. And now the most common fault with these LG 50PS3000s is the Z sustain failing, and actually somebody in the past has repaired the Z sustain, because there's a cap there that's been replaced, and these three devices on this heatsink have also been replaced, as well as these two resistors. Of course these tend to fail because it's LG and it's under-designed. They could have put a bigger heatsink on that, but no, they basically get too hot and go short circuit. But somebody's repaired this in the past. So if I fire on the TV and show you what fault, or what the symptoms of the failure is, I've got my meter probe in the VS line. Oh, it's actually come on straight away. But watch this. So the VS is on. There you go. And it comes back up. And it goes off. And it'll stay up. I won't touch the main board at all. And you can see that the VS rail stays on fine. And it appears to have sorted itself. But what's happening is the VS and VA rails were dropping out. And the TV would be troublesome to start, of course, because without those rails the standby LED just flashes, because it's detecting that the sustain boards aren't working. And so initially I thought that one of the sustain boards was failing in circuit, so I took them out and checked every device. Not a single device was leaky or shorted or anything. I also checked the buffer board because I have had issues with a similar LG. It was a PG3000 where the buffer board blew and was causing a lot of glitches, but the buffers are all fine, as well as the Y sustain and Z sustain. So then I put my attention onto this control board here, and I have had, again, I've got an older video on my channel called 50PQ3000 repair log or whatever, when I repaired a 50PQ3000 and it was the control board that was going intermittent. So I researched about the capacitors on this going defective, so I replaced all of the 100 microfarad 25 volt caps on here and fired the TV on. It worked, and then all of a sudden it cut out again, so I don't think the control board was at fault. So I was focusing on the power supply, and I was unhooking the sustain boards, checking the voltage. I even put a load on the VS and VA rails, and they still quit out, even with the control board completely disconnected and the Y and Z sustain completely disconnected. So I was then looking at the power supply. I was checking these two FETs here, as well as these resistors that are part of the PFC circuit, because I have had a similar issue on a PG2000 or something, where the PFC had failed, and as soon as the power supply got loaded down with the sustain boards firing on, it was shut off. And it was to do with two resistors on the power supply. But the PFC's all running fine, and those resistors and all the resistors on the power board check good. So I was looking around for ages, checking things, and what I would normally do is go by this little legend here and check the voltages, but I never did that. So I was checking the VS on, and that was coming up and then going away. Now the VS on signal is generated by the main board, tells the power supply to bring up the VS and VA voltage rails for the sustain boards, and that voltage was coming up, going away, and whenever I tapped the main board or flexed it or something, the voltage would come and it would fade, depending on how I was to, you know, treat this main board. So figured it was a main board fault, and it's actually working now, but it's very intermittent. It's actually working pretty good now, but nope. And it will work until I touch the main board, so I'm going to replace this and get back to you. Okay, so I thought that before I got a replacement main board that I showed the what actually happens with the VS on signal when the main board faults out. It doesn't happen when the board is warm, and that's probably because the BGA solder is making a better bond. I think that it is something to do with cold solder joints on this, or even on this cable here. So I'm going to try and show you what the VS on signal rail does. It's going to be quite hard to capture. Shows the poor camera work. I'm tired and blah blah blah. Okay, zoom in on that. Okay, set that back to 20. To get that wire in the way. So on this little legend here, you can see that. Oh, focus. So on this little legend here, it tells us the pin out. You can see that VS on is the third pin up, so that will be that pin on the main board connector. So the first test, you will see if the TV works or not. If it goes to 3.3 volts, it failed that time, failed that time. So I'm going to flex the main board. There we go. 3.3 volts, and the TV is fired on. That's because the main board is. Oops, that was my fault then. That's because the main board has told the power supply to bring up the VS and VA voltage. Now, if I tap the power supply, the main board, it faults out, and then brings back up. Seems to be fairly stable, but when it's working, it sends that signal. Now, looking at the legend again, I'm going to get the TV to fault out, and I will show you what the AC detect signal does, which basically tells the power supply to turn on. Now that is running, and that's the main board actually firing on the 12 volt rail and the lower voltage rails on the power supply. However, this signal never faults out, even when the sustain boards and the VS signal fails, because it's completely different from the VS on signal. You see? And that's the VS on again. Now, the reason why I'm pretty certain it's a cold solder joint is because when the TV's cold, it will not start at all. It's literally completely dead. And it's not any of these regulators, because they're all working fine even from cold start up. Now, get my meter out of here, stop anything accidentally shorting out, because the TV's actually on at the minute. Now this main processing chip here, which is under this heatsink, that is incredibly hot. Like, the heatsink is insanely warm. It is really hot, which shows that this chip under here is working hard, and then over time, as this TV proudly says it's lead solder free, which this mainboard will also be lead solder free. The solder underneath this chip, which is BGA welded by the way, actually cracks over time and loses connection, so that's why when I flex it, it comes back on. Now this type of failure of the main board failing to send the VS on signal is just probably because the part of the chip that processes that signal has unsoldered itself. You could have a completely different symptom of failure if you get BGA solder failure on your main board. So don't use this video as a tutorial. I'm just kind of showing you what I've had to do. So I'm going to lift the TV up. It is actually displaying an image, you just have to trust what I say. You can tell that the control board is actually running, and the image is stable as well. It's not got any flashing pixels. In fact, I can't even show you. It's not got any type of discharge in it or anything. It's definitely the main board at fault. I have quite a few of these laying around at work. I think I have one that where the audio circuit failed. It possibly could even be due to this chip again. I have one that puts bars on the screen, which almost led me to believing that the TV that I had was a failed plasma panel, but it was actually the main board. Yeah, but this was quite a difficult one to diagnose. So I'm going to get a new main board, and hopefully it fixes this TV. Keeps it out of the trash anyway. So what a nightmare. So here is the replacement main board for this LG TV. So I'm going to unwrap this, install it, and see if it fixes the issue. Okay, so here's the replacement main board in the TV, and before I power it on, it all works, and it was the original main board at fault, so let me just show you the result. VS charges straight away, and the sustain board start running, and it does not fault out at all. So I'm also going to show you the VS on, which is this. Stays at 3.25 volts or 3.3 volts, which is what it should be constantly. So that's good. So power off, just to show you. So show you that the TV is displaying an image, which is rather hard to do, so I don't think I'm going to be able to do it whilst it's up here, but I'm going to reassemble the TV and get it on the stand and show you it working. So the main board was at fault with, I'm guessing, failed BGA solder joints, as these boards are lead-free solder, which is always prone to failing after time. The solder cracks and causes glitches like that. But it's good to see. Fire's on first time, so I'm going to vacuum it out and put it back together. So it's good stuff.
The officer who interpreted for General Percival at the fall of Singapore.
Okay, so the TV is all fixed and all working fine. It was the main board, as I said. If I turn it off, fire's right back on. There we go.
He never sleeps because he was constantly pleading the cause of someone condemned to die. He survived activity.
So that's just a quick look at the repair of this LG 50PS3000 50-inch plasma that I had to undertake. Tell you what, this is quite a difficult one, and I've never really seen a failure like that before where the main board is causing the VS and not to come off, but it does happen. So another LG fixed. In my opinion, LG are one of the worst TVs out there. They're just so unreliable and massively under-designed. I mean, this particular model, as I said before, has a lot of known issues with the Z sustain and the Y sustain and resistors on the power board or something, but it's working for now, so hopefully it lasts a couple more years before something else goes out, because something else will fail on this, guaranteed. But it's working for now at least. So thanks for watching. I hope this helped. Hope if you ever get one of these 50PS3000s doing a similar issue, just flashing the standby LED and occasionally working, just check what VS on and power on signals the main board is given and see if actually tapping the main board or moving it affects the behaviour of the TV, because in my case it did. That's why it took me so long to diagnose, because intermittent faults like this are a pain to find, but I found it and the set is now working. So thanks for watching and see you in the next one.